Well, welcome back to One True Podcast. My guest today from CBS Sports, Baylor's own, Shehan Jeyarajah. Shehan, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much. Excuse me. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. I mean, hey, we're just getting started. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just the first
it's
week of
week
the
one for
college
all of
football
us, man.
season.
Yeah, it's week one for all of us.
Right. Well, let's get right into it. You were at Baylor Auburn, and obviously that game did not go um, probably as well as Dave Aranda and Baylor fans, with all the hype that was in going into it. Probably didn't go as they wanted it to. So, from your perspective, what went wrong? Where was the biggest misstep for the Bears, and I guess what's their biggest improvement going forward?
Well, I think to me, when Jackie Marshall went down at defensive end, it just changed everything about the game. Um, we knew that they were a little shallow on the defensive line. I thought that they were a little shallower at tackle, but their edge play was not good enough when Jackie Marshall went out. I thought they fought really hard early in that game. They really gave Auburn's right side of the line some trouble. But when he went out, the run defense was just gone. And they got bowled over in such a big way. I think you started to see the linebackers trying to do a little bit too much in the running game, and I think that everybody just panicked a little bit. Even I think the lack of leadership on the field came through in some
Hmm.
ways on the defensive side of the ball. So I mean, when you look at this team, like I think that everything else you felt okay about. Like, yeah, obviously the offensive line got a little overrun as well, but I didn't think it was that bad overall. I thought that they pass blocked pretty well. Obviously it's very unfortunate for them that that 50-yard Bryson Washington run got called back, but there were opportunities. I thought they did enough. I thought that Sawyer didn't have his best day, but I thought that he did enough. I thought the receivers looked fantastic for the most part. And I thought the DBs actually were in pretty good position overall. Obviously, they had a lot of help. They played a lot of guys back in coverage, but they did their jobs. It was really that run defense was the one thing that was just a total disaster.
And for me, like Dave was talking today, I asked him straight up, like, how's Jackie doing? Because I agree. I think have not having Jackie Marshall is a huge piece of that defensive line. He's very clearly their best defensive lineman, in a position that lost a few to the transfer portal and tragically lost Alex Foster to some gun violence. But he said that Jackie Marshall is still day to day, was not practicing with the team, and so I would be very surprised if Jackie is back for this week against him at SMU, which is another running quarterback, and I think is, if you're going into it, it provides even more problems for the Bears. But yeah, I think that the defensive line is the biggest issue, and I don't know how fixable that is, and I don't know if, like, can you coach people up to just tackle better? Is that an effort thing? You mentioned the leadership piece, maybe not showing itself as much as you want. Like, do you think some of the issues that kind of reared their ugly heads against Auburn are they fixable?
It's a good question. And, I think that obviously I'm not around the team every single day, but it seemed like they wanted to be able to really play three down guys a little bit more often than they have in the past. I just don't know if that's doable at this point. I think that you almost have to change up what you do schematically to compensate for it. And maybe it doesn't mean another down lineman. Maybe it just means that, you're sort of Jack or Rover in the box even more than what you've seen. But like, I'll say this. I don't think that what Baylor ran out there schematically is sustainable. I don't think that they can continue to do that. I don't think that they can continue to try to run the defense that they wanted to. The thing that I was potentially excited about with this team in the front was like I felt like the line was at a place, especially with some of the DTs they brought in, to where like you would get to start to see some of the like creepers action that you
Mm-hmm.
get from Dave
Mm-hmm.
Aranda, that you get to see some of these delayed blitz stuff. And I'll even ask you as well, like did you expect to see a little more Travion Barnes? Like I thought that maybe I know that they were listed on the depth chart at the same position with Keaton Thomas, but like I was surprised that we didn't see any of that.
Right. And I would like I think when they brought in Travion Barnes and Phoenix Jackson, I kind of pictured them, or Dave has even said straight up about how they are kind of, two sides to a coin. Whereas, Travion is really good against the run and Phoenix is really good against the pass. We saw a lot of Phoenix.
Yeah.
and he admittedly did get some pressure on Jackson Arnold, and I think he forced a fumble too. But
Yeah.
like,
He played a good game for sure.
absolutely. But I agree. Like, where was Travion Barnes? And that's a really good question.
Yeah.
And like he was a conference player of the year. Yeah, it was in Conference USA, but still a conference player of the year, and they were super high on him. So you're right. Where was he? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, you always wonder like, okay, maybe do we've heard great things about Phoenix Jackson all at camp, and again, I
Hmm.
thought he looked really
Hmm.
good being on the field, but it does get into that situation of like you said, of trying to get your best run defenders on the field. Now, I think when you look at Baylor's game plan, it was very much let's play two safeties over the top. Let's try to make sure that we don't run into trouble against the pass. And again, I thought they did a really good
Hmm.
job of that. But you started to see the adjustment as well, where I can't remember who the player was who was doing it, but they added a spy in the second half, and he just got blown by a couple
Right.
of times,
Right.
right? And I almost feel like you're in a situation in that particular game where you say, did Jackson Arnold, you hit two really nice passes to Cam Coleman and Malcolm Simmons, but like keep doing it. Like just keep doing
Right.
it.
Force them to into doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting because I also want to be clear. There's only one other team on Baylor's schedule who I think could really take advantage of them like this, and that's Utah. I look at the rest of the schedule. Maybe I'm missing somebody, but there's not anybody who's going to be that dominant up front.
Right.
Heading into the
Right.
year, Auburn felt like the thing that they've circulated all offseason long is we feel like we have six offensive linemen who are NFL prospects after this year. And I don't know if I saw six out there who were
Right.
NFL prospects, but I definitely saw at least three, especially on that left side of the line. Their center Connor Liu, I think, had an incredible game. And so it's so yes, this isn't going to be as bad all the time, but you do start to kind of look up and be like, man, I feel like you go back to that 2021 team. Remind me when you got here again. Did you get here in 22 or
Yeah. When I got here,
yeah,
my first year was 2023 when they won 3 games.
23. So back in 2021, right? They had a couple of really dynamic defensive ends who had been in the program for a couple of years, right?
Hmm.
Gabe Hall, who obviously kind of struggled after that. But like they just had such a depth of guys left over from Matt Rule.
Hmm.
And I don't feel like they've developed replacements over the past 2 or 3 years. Like I think that that's been as existential a problem for this defense as anything. That they added, of course, a really good D tackle in Apu a couple of years ago, who was a big part of that
Right.
that Big 12 title. But like that's been like probably the biggest Achilles heel for me
Mm.
of this team, maybe even in general, is I don't feel like they've done a good job of developing defensive linemen, especially at end and edge rusher, who are good enough to get on the field.
That's a excellent point. I mean, like you even look at the starting, probably looking at the starting edge rushers going into SMU, Cooper Lands, who for the last 3 years has been an interior lineman,
Yeah.
and then whoever Dave would not name who is behind Jackie Marshall today, it's like he doesn't even know. Like, so I think that there's some issues with depth there. That's a really good point that they really haven't, like, since Gabe Hall, since even TJ Franklin, kind of,
Yeah.
that those
Yeah.
guys, they haven't had someone like that. And that's hard. Probably their best guy, Brendan Bett, transferred to Florida in the spring. So, it's just that's a really good point that they haven't been able to kind of develop someone at that position, which is such a key position in kind of how Baylor wants to play. Great point. Looking a little bit ahead to SMU. I another running quarterback. I don't know if we're gonna run into any more of the same issues. Like what I know that SMU was a playoff team from a year ago, and Kevin Jennings I think can be really good. What are your early thoughts on SMU and how they might stack up against kind of the Baylor defense that we saw against Auburn?
I think one interesting piece is going to be how much do they try to run Kevin, because
Mm.
he is an athletic guy, but he wants to be a pocket passer. Like he is really, really good from the pocket. He's somebody who, like, again, he's more of a mover to buy time to throw in his ideal world. Now he has the speed and athleticism to get outside, and I mean there were a lot of programs that would have looked at him at other positions than quarterback, but like he has proven clearly that he is very much a quarterback at this level. So I'm curious for Rhett Lashlee coming in. For people who don't know, comes off of the Gus Malzahn tree, and you see what Gus Malzahn does, obviously with Tommy Castellanos in that Florida State Alabama game. I certainly don't think that. I mean, because Kevin's a little bit of a skinnier kid too. I don't think they want him to
Mm.
get too beat up. But I'm curious, do you try to run an early draw, right? Like second, you're in 2nd and 7 on the first drive of the game. Do they try to draw, do a draw so that Baylor has to account for it once again? And that kind of, and then if that's successful, it messes with their game plan. The thing that I will say though is that SMU is not as good on the offensive line as Auburn. Not that close. They lost a couple guys to the NFL from their playoff team last year. And they're very young at running back. Last year, they had a guy, Brashard Smith, move over from wide receiver to running back, ended up rushing for 1,200 yards, now in the NFL. They're looking more at like redshirt freshmen back there now.
Mm.
So they're not going to be able to do some of the things that Auburn was able to do to take advantage. But with all that said, I think that the receivers aren't as good as Auburn's, but like they're very good. And Kevin Jennings as a passer is a substantially better passer than what Jackson Arnold has proved to this point. So it's going to have to be, I mean, again, like you really do need your front to take care of business. You do
Right.
need them. They don't have to dominate this game, but like you just can't afford to have to dedicate more to the box because there are just too many guys out there. RJ Maryland's back from injury now. They've kind of moved into more of a from tight end to more of a full-time receiver role. Matthew Hibner, I think, is one of the more underrated tight ends in the ACC, and that doesn't even get into the receivers, the Jordan Hudsons, I think Moochie Dixon's still there. I need to look at their roster, but like they've got dudes who can really take advantage if you give them space.
And if I'm Dave Aranda, like I am so happy that the SMU game comes the week after Auburn, because all of the narratives that are about like is how is this defense going to stack up? Can Baylor win the big one? Like, can they stop a running quarterback? You have that opportunity right now, like you mentioned, with maybe not the same level of player. And so I think that this provides Baylor an opportunity to kind of right the ship in a big way and kind of shift the narrative back to, all right, maybe Baylor is a fringe playoff team contender for the Big 12, all of these things. And, I expect Dave Aranda to have the defense ready. I expect Keaton Thomas to maybe show some of the leadership that they know he has and kind of help get the Bears kind of back going in the direction they want to headed into, conference play. But all right. So I do want to ask about the offense. I know I've been kind of harping on how bad the defenses looked, but
How could you not,
it was
right?
pretty bad, right? Um, I mean, to me, the Baylor offense looked pretty good against Auburn. Do you have any concerns, observations about like not only the Auburn game, but kind of the Baylor offense as a whole this season? Like, what are your big picture things, ideas about maybe how good they can be, or where any concerns are?
Yeah, I'm very excited about what I saw in that game, especially upon a rewatch. Like, I think that, look, Sawyer has, a couple of passes that he's still struggling with. Like, I think those outside the numbers midfield passes are something that he's just not very good at. And I felt like they kind of overdid those passes at times early in the game to try to spread the field. But if you go to the middle of the field, like Baylor is ridiculous. And I thought the emergence of Cole Wilson
Mm.
was maybe the biggest story of the entire game. Like we knew that Michael Trigg was going to be good, of course, but Cole Wilson is so fast. Like he was running past SEC DBs like they were nothing.
And they made it look easy. Like he was on
Yeah.
skates out there, just
Yeah.
gliding.
And I thought he had great hands as well for like the positions that he's put. I mean, the thing that people don't understand is that yeah, speed is great. But like when you have speed and also the focus and concentration to make those catches when you're running full speed, that's not a skill that can be assumed. I don't want to go all the way to making this comparison, but like back in 2013, Baylor had a receiver, Tevin Reese, who was like a track
Mm.
star. And again, he was just one of those guys who was shot out of a cannon. Uh and he just had such great hands running at full speed. And Cole Wilson reminded me a little bit of that with some of his performance. And again, that was kind of my big question was like, do they have the big game player, right? Like, do they have the downfield threat? Because I think that they have in Josh Cameron one of the best possession receivers in the Big 12. I think he's gonna be much better than what he was
Right.
in week one. Michael Trigg in the middle of the field is an absolute game changer. A little bit of an up and down game from Ashton Hawkins, but I think that he had his moments as well. And I was curious if we'd see another guy maybe step up. Cole Wilson is one of those guys. Do you see some of the younger receivers get into the mix as well? I think it's certainly possible, but I mean, I think that you have to feel amazing about the state of those top four receivers.
Hmm.
I think the offensive line again overall did a decent job. It wasn't their best game, but I don't think was their worst game either. I think that against less, less talented defensive ends than Kendrick Falk, they're gonna
Yeah.
look just fine, especially in the running game. And again, like oh, the other thing too was the freshman kid, 22.
Caden Knighton. Caden
Yeah,
Knighton.
Caden Knighton. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That dude moves like a senior. Like the thing that gets me about him, because obviously he's big and strong and athletic, but like his patience is crazy.
Right.
I think it was his second carry, and I believe he got stopped at the line, but like he was standing back there and like skipping like he was Le'Veon Bell. Like it was crazy just him like waiting for things to develop. Like so many young running backs just run as fast as they can straight ahead. And he has so much burst and quickness, right? Because there's speed and there's quickness. Quickness is how
Hmm.
fast you can get into that cut. I think that Caden Knighton is just so good. And look, I mean, the loss of Dawson Pendergrass is big. There's no question about it. But like, if Caden Knighton's gonna look like that, he's at least going to help a whole lot.
Man, bringing up Le'Veon Bell to a Spartan like me, man, it wouldn't be one true podcast like with me if I didn't bring up Michigan State. So like, I didn't even have to do it this week. That's good stuff. Man, like I have no concern about Baylor's offense, which if you ask me that, tell me that in 2023 when I first got here, like it looked like
You
you
have to
were
see
like,
some stuff, man. You have to see some stuff.
if you don't love me at my worst, you can't love me at my best, or whatever that phrase is. Uh, but like, I do have a little bit of a concern with Sawyer, and his lack of running. I think that there were a few times in that game where I kind of wanted him to just like go, like just like he had kind of some space. Maybe he could stretch it to a first down, and he kind of didn't. So I don't know. I know he had an ankle injury to end last year. Dave says he's healthy, but I don't know. That's the only question that I have is Sawyer's running ability, and maybe it was just Auburn and he were waiting for, players to get open and all that. But that's my only real concern about the Baylor offense. But man, it's fun to watch. Caden Knighton, fun to watch. Bryson Washington, great. Lots of good stuff to like on offense. I do want to broaden out a little bit, ask about the Big 12. I'm curious. I couldn't really. Who is your pick to win the Big 12 and why?
Yeah, I picked Texas Tech coming into the year, and the
Mm,
biggest reason was that trench play. I think they're going to have a chance to just be absolutely freaky in the trenches, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They bring in, of course, David Bailey from Stanford, Romello Height from Georgia Tech, Lee Hunter from UCF. Like, they should have one of the best defensive lines, not just in the conference this year, but I think that one of the best in like the past few years in the conference, even including, by the way, the Texas and Oklahomas of the world. And so I think that they're going to be really good there. They brought in three guys to compete for starting spots on their offensive line, so I think they'll be deeper there than they've ever been. And look, they played I can't remember which FCS opponent they played, but not a very good one. But they obliterated them. They were up like
right.
28-0, like with 5 minutes left in the first quarter, and that's what you want to see, right? You want to see them just put a team to bed immediately. And so certainly much tougher challenges ahead for them, but that's who I picked, and that trench play is a big deal because here's the deal too, right? Like I mentioned Utah obviously for Baylor as a team that really would be able to take advantage of some of the struggles that they had on the D line. If they were to make a Big 12 title game, Texas Tech absolutely could do it too. Like they're
Hmm.
that type of team. And so I think that the funny thing about one, the SEC, and two, trench play in general is that there's a certain level of trench play that you need to hit to almost be able to compete in those games, right? Because I think that Baylor at most of their positions were as good or better than what Auburn put on the
Yeah.
table. They
Yeah.
just got so beat up at that one part of the field,
Right.
like you almost couldn't play a game, almost because you just couldn't compete enough there. And I think that Texas Tech, if things work out for them, could be that level of especially defensive line.
My biggest thing with Texas Tech coming into this year, and if people have not read your amazing story on like Texas Tech and how and why they spent all this money, and yes, it's been making headlines, but they did it for a reason, they did it for a purpose, they have a plan, all of these things. Go read your story, it's excellent. But my biggest question was like all of these new pieces and just kind of like rebuilding the roster through the transfer portal kind of overnight with a bunch of money. Will it gel? And so well, you kind of answered it, but like do you think it will work and why will it work?
So I think the one thing that I really try to emphasize to people is, because I get a lot of the Florida State comparison, right? The
Mm,
2024 Florida
yeah,
State where they bring in all these guys to try to rebuild their roster and it's a disaster. I do think, well, one, it's more comparable to 2023 Florida State, but I think that actually the other comparison from this past weekend is LSU. And here's what I mean by that. They saw specific holes that they wanted to fill on a roster that they felt like was already pretty good. Like, this is not them going from 0 to 100. This is them trying to go from 75 to 90. And they're like, well, where we struggled last year in an 8-win season with a lot of guys coming back is we could not hang in the trenches with the best teams. And more than that, so last year, 6 of Texas Tech's 8 wins came by one score. The goal this year is to not be in 8 one-score games, right? Like,
yeah,
and so if you're able to put away 7 or 8 teams on your schedule without having to break a sweat, that's really what they're trying to do. And then you play they have 3 really tough games at Kansas. Well, we'll see if Kansas State is still a tough
right,
game at this point, but at Utah and at Arizona State, like really tough games. Well, okay, if you split those games, like you could win 10 games that way,
right.
right? And so I think that that's what stands apart to me is again, the quarterback's the same guy, the wide receivers are mostly the same guys. The linebackers actually, they loved who they had there already, especially Jacob Rodriguez, who I think on a good defense will have a chance to be an All-American. He's really, really good. They felt decent about their secondary. They felt like actually it was more that their D line didn't buy them any
Hmm.
time. And so they feel like, okay, we had a lot of the pieces that we felt like we needed to have. For LSU, like who I mentioned, right, it was let's stack up that secondary, let's bring in a bunch of guys. For Texas Tech, it was offensive defensive line. And that's why I think that it will work. Again, we'll have to wait and see, obviously, but it's because they were very targeted. They didn't just try to say, well, we need players everywhere. Let's bring in 45 transfers.
Right, man. It's fascinating to watch, and I guess I sitting here in Waco, like I hear a lot of Texas Tech hate, you know. But
I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
right, big, yeah, shocker.
There's
I
there's definitely people who are one of two ways about the way that Joey left. I know that much.
right,
It's very, very unusual. There's so many. The fun thing about the Tech story is like there were so many angles, especially even related to Baylor specifically,
mm,
that were so interesting because like again, I could it's probably a little far out at this point to have done it, but like there's a whole story to be written about like Joey leaving a Big 12 title team a month
right,
early. Like that's
right.
who does that, right? I mean that I kind of alluded to it because I think that it's just such an indication too of like, man, there are probably like 5 jobs on the planet at the FBS level, probably less that Joey could get. And
Hmm.
like especially at the power level, maybe it's like Baylor, Tech, or TCU. Like that's probably the only jobs he'd be considered for in that way. So it's just it's so fun, and that's why I really hope. And I picked it in the preseason. We'll see, especially with some of the run defense issues, whether it comes true. I picked Baylor, Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game. And I mean, the storylines in that matchup would just be incredible.
They don't play like I know there's
I
a lot
know
of people
it
here,
sucks.
you
It
know,
sucks.
there's a lot of people here that still wanted Joey to be the head
Sure,
coach.
sure.
And then now I think are a little bit more free to talk some trash because they don't play Tech this year. So it's
Yeah.
like you're spending all that money, then Baylor didn't have to play. I don't know, but I kind of agree. I kind of hope they play in the Big 12 title game. Um, I guess I do want to take maybe not Baylor and Texas Tech. Aside from them in the Big 12, who from this weekend, which is pretty much over at this point, um, impressed you from the Big 12, whether that's a team, a player? Has anyone stood out or any team?
Yeah, I mean, what Utah did to UCLA, I think was really impressive. I think it was like 41-14 was the
Mm-hmm.
final, and frankly, the game wasn't even that close. So like it was a total demolition. Now, I think UCLA is going to not be very good, but just still go on the road against a power conference team and completely, treat them like an FCS opponent. I think that that's very impressive. I mentioned their offensive line. That's I think the unit that's going to carry them, but I saw some flashes that I wanted to see from Devin Dampier as a passer. That was probably my biggest question coming into the year. And again, there are Big 12 teams that will give him many more issues than UCLA can, but I think that they firmly move up into the contender category after how they've looked in week one. And for me, they were like a cusp team heading into the
Right.
year. Now again, there's definitely a spot in that top group because Kansas State is no longer there. So I think that they looked really good. I mean, it was against an FCS opponent, but I liked what I saw from Bear Bachmeier at BYU. Five
Hmm.
touchdowns. I think he was like 7-11 passing and averaged like 11 yards an attempt or something like that. So again, bad opponent 100%, but he looked as poised and interesting as I wanted to. And also one other team I'll throw out there who I think has looked pretty good through two games actually is Kansas.
Hmm.
Kansas really is starting to look like Kansas of old offensively. I feel bad because he's a great guy, but like I don't think the Jeff Grimes thing made any sense there either. I hate for him because again, I think that he's a great offensive line coach, great guy, but like it's not lost on me that 23 Baylor happens, 24 Kansas happens. He had a really bad week, week one at
You're
Wisconsin.
right.
But they went back to their quarterbacks coach, Jim Zebrowski, I believe his
Mm-hmm.
name
Mm-hmm.
is now their full-time offensive coordinator. He was like a co-OC with Andy Kotelnicki, and immediately you start to see some of the like Kotelnicki fun again. And so, it's still early. They only played Fresno State and Wagner, so like again, no need to overreact as yet, but it was exactly what I would have hoped to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jeff Grimes, he kind of fits. If it's going to work somewhere, it's probably
Yeah,
Wisconsin.
yeah.
But for me, the Big 12 team that has really shown me something is Iowa State.
Yeah.
Like I know that game against Kansas State in week 0 was not very pretty, looked more like rugby than football at times, but like, what they did against South Dakota, Rocco Becht, 19 of 20, 3 touchdowns, like if
Top
they
five
can.
FCS, by the way, like really good
Right. Like
FCS.
that's a good FCS win,
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
dominated. And so, uh yeah, I mean if they can figure out kind of the back end and keep doing what Rocco Beck can do, I grew up a Mark D'Antonio. I went to school when Mark D'Antonio was at Michigan State, and Matt Campbell has a lot of those same
Second
kind
Michigan
of,
State mention. How
hey,
about that?
I'm gonna keep going. This is my podcast. I can do whatever the heck I want. Right. We're gonna talk about, you want to talk about the 15 Cotton Bowl next? What that was, chrome
We do not
helmets.
need to do it. We
Chrome
do not.
helmets.
Well, hey. There were two of those. We could talk about the second one.
But anyway, Matt Campbell, like he does a lot of the same things and kind of getting the 3 stars and building them up. And man, I really like what he does at Iowa State, and I think they can be a sleeper. Maybe not for the playoff, but at least to get to Arlington and stuff. But yeah. Well, Shehan, thanks for doing this. Tell everybody where they can follow you, read you, listen to you now, right? Like what do you got going on?
Whew, a lot going on, but you can follow me on all social media platforms at Shehan Jeyarajah. You can find all my work at cbssports.com, and you can listen to our new CBS Sports podcast, The College Football Insiders, which drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. I'm usually on at least two of the three a week. We have like a rotating cast. So we dropped our Sunday recap show. So make sure and check that out.
Cool, cool. Well, thanks, Shehan, and I'm sure you'll be back on before the end of the season. So thanks again.
Hopefully they're good enough that I have a good excuse. Thanks so much for having me.